Greetings and salutations, YouTube land. Now, one thing you may know about me if you watch enough of my videos or listen to me is I spent a long time working in the retail and grocery sector. At this point, I've depressingly been in there I think it's over 25 years. Yeah, wow. Over 25 years at this point. Ugh. And one thing that's a common sight in that industry is someone either walking out back or into the break room looking so upset, so frustrated, going, "You won't believe how stupid the customer I just had was," then regaling us with the story of how weird or how dumb this interaction was, which is usually followed by everybody else telling their favorite. I have kind of collected a ton of these stories over the long time I've been out in this industry. And here are my top 10 favorite funny/weird customers ever. Coming in at number 10, when it's the Christmas season, shoppers forget their brains at home. Everybody knows it. People get stupid and they say weird things. This one happened to my mother-in-law when a customer walked up to her, looked her in the face, and said, "Are Santa's balls made of chocolate?" To which my mother-in-law said, "Well, he's a very nice man, but I've never checked," and walked off. Makes you wonder, are they? Number 9 was a slip of the tongue, but it couldn't have gone much worse. I've worked in deli/deli counters for quite a while, and they had one unfortunate customer who seemed to have something else on her mind when she walked up and ordered the black pecker turkey breast. She had no idea what she said, and the two teenage boys behind her heard everything and were doubled over laughing. Well, I was forced to try to keep a straight face through that order. Wasn't easy. Number 8 was one I didn't actually witness, but I heard about it right after, and I take this one as fact. It was a store my mother worked at, Walmart if you're interested. And a woman my mom was friends with came up from the service desk and said, "You won't believe the return I just had." And considering the returns that we had heard of and seen, we were all intrigued. She looked at us and said, "A guy just returned condoms." To which I, being a teenager at the time, said, "Why, she get pregnant?" No, when I asked him the reason because I had to, he replied, "Because they kept falling off." Yep. I cannot believe any guy ever would bother to return condoms, and if he did, give that reason for why. You got to admire his balls, if not his, well, you know. Number 7 is more of just a kind of a foolhardy person I had to deal with personally. One thing I've always hated working in retail is doing carryouts. When somebody buys something big and needs help getting it into or to their car. Because most people do not have vehicles that can handle this stuff, and it's always a nightmare. This one was they bought a kayak, a full-size kayak, probably 6-7 feet long. Pretty big little boat. I get it on a flatbed, get it out to their car, and they have a 2-door Ford Focus. This big. They wanted me to put this thing in the back of the car. Just for reference, The kayak was longer than the car. I flat out refused to put this thing in the back because literally 2/3 of it was sticking out the back, and there was no way I was going to be responsible for that going down the road, especially since she had to take the highway. She wanted me to put it on the roof, but company policy forbade us for ever doing that because they had to pay for too many scratches. So I told her I'm sorry I couldn't. I could bring it back and hold it for her until she could bring it back with a truck or something. She insisted it go on the back, asked me how she was supposed to get it home. I got a little agitated, suggested we tie the car to the kayak and she take that home. That one didn't go over well. The manager just kind of smirked and said, "Don't say that." And it pretty much ended up with me leaving her with the kayak and her trying to figure out how to get that thing in. I sometimes wonder if she ever did make it home. Number 6 is once again somebody who was just completely brain dead. I was working in a deli. We sold those big party subs, those long ones. Behind me was a sign that showed the life size, the actual size of the sub. I had a person walk up to me, look me dead in the face, and go, "How big is your 3-foot long sub?" And they were serious. I looked at them and said, 3 feet. To which they said, "How big is that?" To which I said, 36 inches. They looked at me confused, so I said, 1 yard. They still looked at me very confused. I pointed at the sign and said, "That big?" And they finally seemed to get the grasp. They then looked at me and said, "Do you think I should pick it up the night before or the day of?" To which I, in my most helpful manner, said, "That depends. Do you happen to have a 3-foot long fridge?" "No. Do you think it needs to stay refrigerated?" "Yes." "I guess I'll have to pick it up day of. I didn't want to make a trip, though." Please, people, when you go shopping, remember your credit card or cash, remember your keys, and remember your brains. It would help us all out. Number 5 is a time where I think I might have seen a divorce happening in real time. I was working in one of those big warehouse clubs. Once again, I was in the deli, and this person was maybe 10, 12 feet away from me. We had a line of like those big refrigerated cases. If you've been in one of those clubs, you know what I mean, where like the milk and dairy and all that was kept. And on the corner of it was a literally 6 foot tall, like couple feet wide freezer where we kept like the 25-pound bags of ice. On the side in red, white, and blue letters were ICE. I was doing something behind the counter. This woman was flying down the aisle with a toddler in the seat, her husband trailing in her wake, when she looks at me and yells, "Do you sell ice anywhere in this store?" I just pointed in front of her when she was about 2 feet away from the freezer, said, "You're about to walk into it." She stopped with a confused look on her face, then turned and looked at the machine directly in front of her. And then her husband, God bless this poor man, looked at her and said, "Hey, honey, what do you think's in that big freezer with ICE written on the side?" She did a heel spin so fast on him, and I literally thought she was going to strangle him in front of me. Personally, I thought it was funny as heck. I sometimes wonder how much longer they lasted after that, because I'm willing to put dollars to donuts. It wasn't very long. Number 4 is another person who clearly forgot their brain. I was working at a East Coast chain. If you're wondering, it was called Ames. And I was there as they were going out of business permanently. On literally the last day we were open, turned out about an hour and a half to 2 hours before they locked the doors for good. If you've never worked or shopped at a store that's going out of business, at some point in the proceedings, they usually stop taking checks, which in this day and age, most stores don't anyway, and they stop taking any and all returns. It's all sales final. Guy came back to return something on the last day we were open, where there were signs everywhere saying, "This is the final day." He was informed he would not be allowed to return it. We weren't accepting returns. Started throwing a hissy fit. For the record, this guy was in like his 60s or 70s, so should have known better. He got towards the door and screamed out, "I'm never shopping here again!" To which everybody, customers and workers included, all stared at him kind of open mouthed. The person who had been dealing with him at the service desk said, "Well, that's a good thing, because we're not going to be here anymore." And he stormed out, and we all had a good laugh, which we all desperately needed. Coming at number 3 is somebody I personally had to deal with. This is the most recent one on the list, and made me believe there are actually aliens among us. I was working in my department where I currently work. I was on the pizza venue. The way it's set up, we have a case in front of us where we put slices that are self-serve. Then we have the low boy behind it where we make the pizzas, and the oven. So a good chunk of the time, our back is turned, but, we keep an eye out. Well, I was over there making a pizza. Guy comes up behind me. I'd been waiting a minute. I honestly wasn't paying that close attention. I was a little focused at that point. Looks at me and says, "Is this where I order a pie?" You know, just to lighten the mood a little and, just my own natural sense of humor. I turned around and said, "Depends. Are you looking for pizza or apple?" Thus began the longest 10 minutes of my life, as this guy looks at me and said, "Apple? What do you mean, apple?" Like, an apple pie? It's just a joke. What would you like? "What do you mean by apple pie? What's apple pie?" And for the record, he was American. Like, crust, apple, cinnamon, sugar, maybe nutmeg if you're feeling a little kinky. You bake it. It's like, stops, literally ponders it a second, goes, "No, I think I'll just get pizza." After he finally ordered his pizza, I turned, looked at the person who was working the deli that night, and as I went to ask them a question, they looked at me and said, "Well, that was painful." Like, was that me? Was I mumbling or not speaking clearly? Like, no, that was entirely them. Then later on, a friend of mine who works in bakery came over while I was cooking said pizza. Looks at me and goes, "I just had this really weird customer. They came up, looked at me, and said, 'What does an apple pie taste like?'" I don't know how on earth this guy, who was clearly in at least his 30s, had never had or heard of an apple pie before. Like I said, pretty sure there's aliens among us, because that is the only explanation. Number 2 is one that happened to my mother. I happened to witness part of it because I used to hang out in the store with her sometimes. So this was a small department store in a small town in New Hampshire. And, they had, especially at that time, they sold some electronics, toys, a little bit of everything. One thing they had was a pet section. Mostly small pets, and it was 2 rows of aquariums that were kind of in the center, and they were on back to each other. One side were all the fish, other aquatic things, The other side were your small rodents, hamsters. I think they had some rats and mice, guinea pigs, gerbils, that sort of thing. You know. Mom's working there. Woman comes up. Can you help me? Yeah, of course. What can I get you? I'm looking for some slow moving hamster food. Slow moving hamster food? Yeah, the hamster can't get just food. Oh, well, ma'am, hamsters just eat like pellets and stuff. You don't have to live feed them. Yeah, I'm giving him these pellets here, but they're moving too fast for him. What do you mean they're moving? Well, I put them in at the top and they just go right to the bottom, and the hamster can't get them and hasn't had a chance to eat. Oh, the hamster's burying it? Oh, that's perfectly normal. That's part of their nature. It's like they like to bury their food, and then when they're hungry, they'll dig it up and eat. Don't worry about it. No, no, he's not burying it. I'm putting it at the top. It's going right to the bottom. She's like, what do you mean? She's like, I put it in. It sinks right to the bottom. The poor hamster can't get it. Honestly, he's not even moving around like yours are. At this point, she points at the tanks. Goes, he's just clinging onto his air filter. She's like, well, you don't need an air filter in a hamster tank, ma'am. They just breathe the normal air. Well, I wanted to get the oxygen into the water. This water bottle? No, like this one here. At this point, she points through the fish tank to the hamster on the other side. You may see where this is going. Goes, yeah, he's just clinging onto the air filter up there. Ma'am, do you have the tank full of water? Yes. Hamsters don't live in water, ma'am. What? You're looking through the fish tanks. Brings around to the other side. Hamsters just live in shavings, maybe a little hot. So yours is trying desperately not to drown, yes. At this point, the woman threw what was in her hands into the air and yelled out, going, "Oh my God, Goldie!" I have no idea how this woman made it. Once again, she was in her 40s or 50s, without having any idea what a hamster was or where it lived. Couple of quick honorable mentions in here. This one happened to my wife when she used to work in a pretty prominent local sub shop in high school and college. And a customer walked up to her and said, "What meat comes on the vegetarian?" To which she replied, "Cheese." And the woman was satisfied with that answer. Oi. My second honorable mention is one that personally happened to me. The place I was working was in the middle of a major remodel where someone at home office got bored and we were moving everything around. And this guy, clearly frustrated, walks up to me. Once again, I'm at the deli, which was apparently the moron information booth. Looks at me and says, "Where do you keep your nuts?" To which my smart ass replied, "They're in my wife's purse. Why do you ask?" Luckily, the guy had a sense of humor, laughed his butt off, and said, "Where in the store can I find peanuts?" To which I pointed him in the direction they had been moved. Finally, the number one weirdest customer I have ever dealt with in my life. And Will, if you made it this far, I know you've been looking forward to this one. Working at the deli, as has been the usual most of my career. Customer comes up. "Hey, can you suggest some turkey for me?" Of course, that's what I do. "Well, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a plain turkey, a flavored turkey? What do you like?" They proceeded to respond, "I'm looking for something that isn't flabby, moist, and fatty, and white, like human flesh. I want a turkey that's not going to remind me of human flesh." Me, never having had the chance to partake in human flesh, was slightly confused and very concerned. I proceeded to just suggest our driest turkey, sliced it without fully turning my back on this weirdo, and watched them until they were out of sight. Never served a cannibal before? Hope to God I never serve one again. So there we go. The top 10 weirdest slash funniest customers I have ever dealt with or heard about. Any of you who work in the service industry out there, you have any weird customer stories? Please post them down below. Let me know what your favorite of these are. Let me know yours, because I love these things, and I probably could do 100 of these videos because I've dealt with that many weirdos in my time. As always, thank you for shopping. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. And none of us hope you have a nice day. Many times we hope your day actively sucks.